Hello, welcome. Today I'm going to quickly go through how to do an HDR photo, a high dynamic range photo. Very exciting, good to know. Let's do it. Okay. So what is an HDR photo? Like I said, it's a high dynamic range photo. It's the process of taking multiple images at different exposures, stacking them all together to make one image with a high dynamic range. DSLR cameras are great, but they do lack a lot of dynamic range. You can get cameras that are better and some are worse. But a lot of times, if you're not using a graduated filter, you'll have the sky that's completely blown out with the foreground exposed correctly, or the foreground will be too dark and the sky will be exposed correctly. So this process, the HDR, merging HDR photos, is a way to get around that if you don't want to use graduated filters or if you don't have graduated filters. So let's get into it. I'll take you through the settings, how to do it in camera, and then in Lightroom. Let's go. So first things first, you want to grab your camera. Very simple to do. You go into the menu and you have this exposure compensation or bracketing. Select that, scroll the wheel here, and you will see that it moves the goalposts in the exposure here. What this is doing is we'll grab three photos that are, it'll grab one that is perfectly exposed, or what the camera thinks is going to be perfectly exposed. It'll grab one that is darker, one stop darker, or however much you set this. I usually go about one stop darker, and then it'll grab a third photo that is one stop brighter. So we'll grab three photos at different exposures. So once that's set, you will see in the exposure here, when you adjust the shutter speed, there are these three dots on the exposure level. That's just showing you where the first one will be, and then the two other ones, the bracketing photos. So I usually like to get it set so it's just the middle line is on the 0 or slightly below. And then a quick tip here is, if you aren't using a tripod, this is very handy. Set your shooting mode to 2-second timer, and then when you push the button, it'll count down the 2 seconds and then grab the three photos right after one another. You want to make sure you grab the photos quickly without moving the camera, just because you want the photos, the composition to be as close to the same in each individual photo. You can still shoot single shooting if you want. It'll grab one photo. It kind of blurs out or darkens all the other ones just to let you know that you're still shooting the bracketing, so it still needs to take the other two photos. You can do that, but I like to just set it to 2-second timer and then have the camera just take three right after another. So let's jump into the computer here. So as you can see, I've uploaded these three photos that I have taken. This one is where the camera thinks it's exposed. This one is darker, and this one is lighter. So the benefit of doing HDR photos in Lightroom is this. So when you look at this photo here, you'll notice that this is completely dark. If you were to take this photo and you wanted to brighten it up, raise the shadows, you still have to go a little bit further, maybe raise an exposure. You want to drop the highlights in the clouds to make those a little darker, but then you start to see a lot of noise in the darker areas just because the camera wasn't able to grab a lot of detail in those darker areas. So that's where HDR comes in handy, because in these, if you look at this brighter image, you'll see that there's less grain in the foreground because the camera was able to capture a lot more light. So what you will do is I'll reset these back to what they were. I will grab all three photos, right click on them, and I will go photo merge and HDR. Wait for that to load. You want to make sure auto align and auto settings are checked just to make it a lot easier for you. And there you go. So that is all 3 images merged together. The other settings here, this deg host amount, that's if you did have any kind of movement, if the waves were moving, or if the camera's moving slightly. You can check this to low, medium, high if there was movement. If there wasn't any movement, you can just do low. I usually keep it on medium, but if there was a good amount of movement, say in these waves, it can, by stacking these images together, it can make the image look a little weird in the waves, where you would have to select a little bit higher, which would correct it. I usually go medium, right in the center. Click merge to finish this up. The computer will do its thing, and it will spit out a merged photo. And there it is. So this is the merged photo of what Photoshop thinks it is doing. So it's taking those 3 exposures from the images, stacking them all into one. Doesn't look great. You need to do a little bit of touching up afterwards. You can raise the shadows a bit, raise the exposure even more. You can add what you want. They do add vibrancy into a lot of these HDR photos. Afterwards, you can adjust it to however you like. But that gives you a good amount of exposure from those 3 images. And there you have it. That is the final photo. So as you can see too, if you zoom into the previous dark sections, into the foreground, it doesn't have any of that noise, and throughout the sky isn't blown out. It's a good amount of exposure. So that is it. That is quick and easy how to do an HDR photo, high dynamic range photo, merging 3 photos together to make one perfectly exposed image. See you on the next video.